So we got new data about life expectancy in America, and it is once again very bad news. So this is from a report in NPR. They say that the average life expectancy for Americans in 2021 shortened by over 7 months in a single year. That's according to new data from the CDC. That decrease follows an already huge decline of 1.8 years back in 2020. As a result, the expected lifespan of someone born in the U.S. is now 76.4 years. That's the shortest it has been in nearly 2 decades. So in 2 single years, we erased 2 decades of gains in terms of life expectancy. The 2 things they point to as the major contributing factors, probably neither one will be a big surprise to you. One was COVID. In 2021, we actually saw more deaths from the pandemic, claimed nearly 417,000 lives. In that year, that was even more than back in 2020. It was the 3rd leading cause of death for the 2nd consecutive year. The other thing that they point to that had a huge impact here, and they said that the COVID deaths made up about 60% of the life expectancy change. The other big contributing factor was deaths from drug overdoses. Those reached over 106,000 in 2021. And
that's
you also
fentanyl. That's what that is.
That's primarily fentanyl. And you also had an increase in deaths by suicide from liver disease or cirrhosis, which is usually caused by alcohol. That also increased and shortened the average American lifespan. And one thing they pointed out, which is math, but it isn't really something that I had particularly thought about, those deaths of despair have primarily come from younger people, and that creates more of a hit on the life expectancy number because, you know, if you're someone who is already older and you're dying from the pandemic, that's going to have a less of an impact dragging down the average lifespan than if you are someone who's 20, 30, 40 and you're dying way too prematurely from something like cirrhosis of the liver or fentanyl.
Now, I also saw this fact the other day, and I just double-checked it to make sure that it's true. It is true. It's not as related to this because the numbers in general are much smaller, but the number one cause of death for children aged 1 to 19 in the U.S. is guns. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Yeah. So motor vehicles are just below it.
Wow.
But yeah, now again,
a lot of drownings in young kids too. That's one of the primary causes for young kids. Yeah,
they have listed here firearm, motor vehicles, other injuries, congenital disease. They don't go into the specifics of that, but I'm sure, you know, accidents are a huge thing at that age. But to your point, to those numbers, you know, when you look at the cause being drug overdoses, being COVID, it's fair to say that's a failure of governance in many ways.
Correct.
You know, because deaths of despair is basically what you would put the drug overdoses in. You'd put it in that category.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, there's ways to mitigate that. Like, if, for example, if we had a country where not only do we have universal health care, but also universal mental health care, including like rehab, that would be, you'd see those numbers go down. The other fact is, and this is one that's sort of a politically incorrect truth, it's an inconvenient truth. Part of the problem here is actually the crackdown on the pain pills, which then pushed people into the black market, which pushed them to take heroin, sometimes laced with fentanyl, and they die. You know, it was all well-intentioned when people started doing the pain pill crackdown because they thought, hey, there's like 20,000 or 30,000 people dying every year from these pills. But then there's unintended consequences. And when they crack down on those, now all of a sudden, boom, the deaths go up because now they're taking heroin and it's laced with fentanyl and they die. There's speculation that Philip Seymour Hoffman, that's how he died. He was a heroin addict. He went and had some heroin and it was laced with fentanyl and he died. Michael K. Williams, I think that's his name, right? The guy who was a wonderful actor. He was on The Wire and among other things. I think it was the exact same thing with him. In terms of the COVID stuff, I mean, there are ways to mitigate it. I know that COVID politics is like, you know, really an issue where people fight until they're blue in the face. But
yeah.
You know, I was always a big proponent from very early on in the pandemic of universal masking because Japan was doing universal masking and they were able to hold COVID at bay for a very, very long time just by using that policy. They didn't shut down their economy. They didn't do anything like that. They just basically everybody wore a mask. It was a social convention there that people just wear masks. And as a result of that, they were able to hold off COVID for a very long time. So like very simple little policy changes could have really made a difference here. And to see a modern nation dropping in terms of, you know, your average age, that is, you know, generally out of step with how other civilized countries progress. Usually they start adding and adding and adding time to the
It's
average
the
age.
most basic sign of a society in decline when you see just literal life and death going in the wrong direction. Both of these issues, both COVID and, deaths of despair and the lack of mental health care, both of these at their core, it's an indictment of our healthcare system. It's an indictment of the fact that we don't have universal healthcare when every other developed nation in the world does. Because, you have looked at the stats of how many COVID deaths could have been prevented if everybody had universal healthcare. I think it's a big part of the story. It's this is a very complex story, but part of the reason we had so many COVID deaths was because of a long history of disconnection from the medical system, of skepticism of the medical system, some of it justified, some of it not, of, skepticism of big pharma, which is out to turn a profit. And that leads people to think, maybe these vaccines aren't what they're presenting them as. So you have layers and layers of distrust. But I do think, sort of at the bottom of that is the fact that you have so many people who are kind of disconnected from having a doctor, having a foot into any sort of typical routine primary care, and having so many negative experiences with our healthcare system that, ultimately they really didn't trust what was being told to them and made decisions that sometimes cost their lives. So I do think universal healthcare is a big, big part of this story ultimately.
Yeah, I can give you the exact number if you'd like. So first of all, it was published in June 2022 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The article I'm looking at here is from Scientific American, and they say 338,000 lives could have been saved during COVID if we just had universal health care.
Yeah.
And look, think of the reason why this is. A lot of people, they're uninsured or they're underinsured, and when they get sick, they have a choice to make. Do I want to go to the emergency room and perhaps I don't have the money, I won't be able to afford it. They're afraid to do that. And some people try to ride it out and then basically waited until they were so sick they needed to go to the emergency room.
Right.
And then by the time they got there, it was just too late.
Right.
So, that's the dynamic that's at work here. And unfortunately, I don't think people, when we talk about what you just said in this article here, I don't think people put two and two together and they realize that this isn't like some ironclad law of nature that it had to be like this, that we have to have the average age going down. It's like that's actually changeable. And there's policy changes we can and should make in order to go in the other direction. I'm sure you don't have the numbers in front of you there, but I would bet that what's happening with the average age of death in the social democracies is not the same thing that's happening here. You know what I mean? Even given COVID and all,
I think other countries have also taken a hit from my recollection, just not nearly as much. Yeah. And the deaths of despair, that piece really is a very uniquely American phenomenon right now, which speaks to a lot of social ills. It's certainly the lack of good healthcare and the stigmatizing of mental health care, the criminalizing of addiction. There's no doubt, like you said, the way that we've gone about trying to fight the opioid addiction crisis has just been completely counterproductive because predominantly people aren't dying when they are getting their oxy script from the doctor. They're dying once they get cut off and they go to street drugs and they go to the black market. And then, we also have a real stigma around these just harm reduction measures. Remember the Biden administration tried to do some really basic shit about trying to reduce drug overdose
I remember this.
deaths. And it was completely, really demonized by
Safe
the
injection
right.
sites, that's what it was.
Yeah, it was really demonized by the right. And so, there are some basic mitigation steps. A thing that Dr. Carl Hart always talks about is you should be able to send away whatever drug you have. You should be able to get it easily tested to make sure it isn't laced with fentanyl.
Well, the right likes to claim you're incentivizing people to do drugs if you have safe injection sites. When the fact of the matter is, the proof's in the pudding. The numbers are there that we know that these things save lives because you can make sure people aren't sharing needles. They're not spreading disease all around. These aren't drugs like you just pointed out that are, cut with something that's going to fucking kill you immediately.
Right.
So they're, provable social improvements as a result of this, but they just don't like that. Oh, this looks like you're incentivizing people to do heroin on the government's dime or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they fearmonger over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's total bullshit. By the way, on the issue of fentanyl and heroin and opioids and opiates in particular, there actually is something that has saved countless lives that's available. But again, because of our terrible healthcare system and mental healthcare system, people don't know about it. But there's this pill called Suboxone, which really has like effectively cured a lot of people of this, opioid addiction. I mean, one of my friends, his dad was addicted to pain pills, and he was taking like 30, 40 a day, whatever the fuck it was. Life was out of control. And then he got Suboxone, and he'll tell you it saved his life.
Wow.
I was just listening earlier to there was a rapper in like the mid 2000s, Bubba Sparks.
Yeah,
he was
I remember him.
Yeah, he was like the like Eminem was the white rapper.
Yeah.
And like then he came along and was like the other white rapper.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
like the more southern, like redneck version.
Yeah, I like him. Anyway, he was talking about how he was addicted to pain pills. I think he had some injury and then he got addicted to pain pills, and then he stopped him cold turkey and realized, like, had like flu symptoms. It was like, Jesus Christ, am I fucking addicted to these pills? And he was buying them on the black market for a while and all that stuff. But he says now he takes Suboxone and
he's good.
And he's good. And it's one of those things where, like with the pain pills, your tolerance keeps going up and up and up and up and up, and you got to take more and more and more and more and more. With Suboxone, you just take, one amount and you do it in the morning, and then you're just good the rest of the day.
So and you don't have those cravings.
Right. And a lot of people
withdrawals.
say, they'll argue, and this was the same thing with methadone as well. Remember methadone clinics for addicts? They'd be like, well, you're still taking a drug, so are you really, not a drug addict anymore? And my response to that is, who fucking cares? As long as you can get your life together and you can be happy and you're not about to kill yourself, then for real, who cares?
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Bubba Sparks had Timberland beats, right? So
I don't remember.
I think he did. So I mean, he was destined to succeed.
Yeah, Timbaland has made Timbaland could have made me an R&B superstar.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.